Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is John Jackson, and as Christina mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Blavity. Blavity is a tech and media startup focused on empowering Black millennials with relevant content, community, and live events. So our real scope is anyone between the ages of 18 to 30. Today I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'll tell you more about Blavity, how we started. I really want to focus on this idea of virality and the historical context behind it. And then I'm going to share a story from my life that I think can hopefully tie that all back together. Cool? Cool. All right, so first things first, right? Media, the main means of mass communication. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, where you are, media is actually the main source of how we communicate and talk to each other. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's anything you use to communicate to the outside world or your insular community. This is my founding team. So this is Aaron, Morgan, myself, and Jeff. Aaron is our COO. Morgan is our CEO. She just got named to the Route 100 early today, so we're really excited about that. Jeff is our CTO. We all went to school together, so we are all sequentially a year apart. I graduated in 2013, and everyone else graduated a year above me. We went to school in Washington University at St. Louis. So if anybody's been to St. Louis, you sort of know the opening of how the city works and things like that. But our college experience was really unique because while we went to a primarily white institution, we had a very insular Black community. So everything was centered around our actual table, right? There was a circular table in our lunchroom, and the term that people used to use to describe that instance was Blavity. So it's the word black and gravity. So it describes the time when you are out and you are in the world and you engage with someone in a cultural context, right? This might happen to you if you're in Home Depot and you see somebody Black across the aisle and you're both looking at each other and you're just like, yes, finally, somebody Black. Like, you felt this, right? This is what it looks like in real life. So this is taken about 2 years ago, so this is where the table is, right? And so it doesn't matter where you are in school, it doesn't matter if you're an engineer, or you're trying to skip a calculus test, or you're trying to go on the first date, you don't have any meal points. This table was the nexus of Black life. For us, when we graduated, we did not have a place where we felt like our stories were being told collectively and cohesively. So when you don't have something like that, you need to make it. And in order to make it, we had to figure out where are the places and spaces and things that our demographic want, need, and look for. So Blavity happened. We are right now the #1 destination on the internet for Black millennials. So those lazy millennials people write about are the people in our community making the most change. The difference is they don't have time to talk about it because they're building what they want to see out of nothing. So we have 1 million monthly active uniques. We have about 10 million impressions a month. And our target cities are New York and LA, DC, Chicago, Atlanta, Austin, and things like that. And quite frankly, our growth has been so organic because we've been able to tap into the gap that is our story and the fact that people aren't telling it as cohesively as we'd like to see it. But the reason we did that is we said who we were before anybody believed us. And so that is what I think is the pinnacle of innovation is you have to know who you are and then say it and then believe it and not worry about whether the market catches up to you. Something that I'm deeply passionate about and think about pretty consistently is this idea of how stories get told, shared, and manifested in a variety of ways. And I think in many respects, judging by the debate we watched last night, which was harrowing, my God, the reality is that things are communicated with a level of quickness that we've never seen before. But the truth is we've seen it, we just might have forgotten how it was communicated. So, June 19, 1865, Major General Granger rides into Galveston, Texas, announces to a group of slaves that they are now free, right? We know this day as Juneteenth. The irony is that 2 years earlier, the Emancipation Proclamation was actually announced, but it took the Union 2 years to start telling people they were free. So imagine actually being free but having to wait for someone to tell you and living your life that way. Now, secondarily, he says this, a minister named Reverend Yates gets $1,000, goes to a park 10 miles away, has a celebration, right, for $1,000. They later buy that park called Emancipation Park. Then they realize that the actual news isn't spreading fast enough, so they send people to different parts of Texas to tell other people that they are in fact free. This is a 2-year viral movement. People started telling other people that they were actually no longer slaves for 2 years. So for me, when I see things pop up online, I try to have the context behind it, because we've always been doing this, but in reality, the way in which we remember it is different, and there are often times where we're not actually focused on that reality. When I was really, really little, I used to dig around at my grandmother's house, as any mischievous kid does. And one of the things I found was her collection of Jet magazines. And I always stumbled on the Emmett Till cover story. And this is really important because Mammy Till actually intentionally decided to have an open casket funeral. And she did that. When they interviewed her, they said, "Why did you do that? You didn't have to do that, that's painful." She said, "I wanted the nation to see what they did to my boy." This event, this funeral, is generally charged as the actual crux, the event that people remember that bolstered the civil rights movement. It was the event that everyone was inescapable. The trial was photographed. People saw the unspeakable pain, right, that she went through. And she knew that her sacrifice would, in some respects, give everyone the fuel they needed to realize that things were actually not okay. This is a girl named Kendall Maxwell. She just graduated from WashU. This is a picture of her 2 weeks after the Ferguson verdict. She is outside. They had blocked the entire throughway through WashU, so there's actually a roundabout. People could not go. So the generational connection between the previous picture and this one is very simple. She's not being heard, and she is making sure that regardless of what you think of her, you understand that the world she lives in is not the one she believes should be her future. At its core, Blavity's ethos is to make sure that Kendall and anyone else that has a story like that doesn't have to worry about where they tell it. Their only concern would be how they would like to communicate that, whether it be written, whether it be photographed, whether it be video. Her voice is just as important as her story, and our aim is to actually make sure that comes to fruition. I found this quote actually when I was making this deck, and I felt like it's actually quite possibly the most salient thing I've read all year, right? Black people silence themselves every day in the name of, "I need this job." So for a lot of people in our community, they actually are dealing with a double consciousness. That is to say, their first and, in many respects, primary objective is to make sure their economic situation is absolved, right? They're able to engage and be who they need to be. The secondary, though, is they know there's something wrong, but they feel like they don't have an outlet. And so our ability to fill in that gap and give them a space, whether that's a pseudonym, a pen name, or a community of people that can actually realize that they're at work and they'd rather be protesting and they're tired of code switching, that is a conversation we want to have openly and actively for them. Finally, this is my grandfather, Robert Louis Jackson Jr. This is my grandmother, Dottie Jackson. Dottie Jackson is from Trinidad and Tobago. She grew up in Port of Spain. She immigrated to the United States. My grandfather is from a small town outside of Jackson, Mississippi. He taught himself how to read using science fiction novels, but the story he most readily told was the fact that he was too poor to bury his parents. So he stood out in front of a church and begged until he could actually dig the open plot and actually put his father into it. They had my father, Robert Jr., who became a National Merit Scholar, went to Brown on a full ride. 2 years in, he actually couldn't afford to stay. So he said, "You know what, it's cost my family too much. I'm going to go into the military." Now, the irony is that his direct sacrifice for me today actually lends itself because it's the reason my brother and I graduated, because he realized that if he wasn't going to graduate, that there was a chance there could be a generational continuance of that. He wasn't comfortable with it. That is not a reality he wanted to live. So he made sure that we knew his story, and then his father's story, and then the fact that his parents were sharecroppers. So quite frankly and quite literally, I am an actual representation of the stories I remembered because I'm able to tell them. And I want to end here because if you give someone the ability to tell their story openly, clearly, factually, they become immovable. Because when you know where you're from, you don't have to worry about what someone thinks of you. Your only focus and intent is to get where you're going, in spite of what anyone tells you. And for me and my team, that is the mission, that is the drive, that is the sole aim of what we do, and why I'm super, super excited about the future, which is deeply informed by our rich